Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. This is Rustam and this is part second of the lecture. The topic is 17th century English literature. So this lecture is being recorded for BS English first semester students studying history of English literature. In my previous lecture, I just talked about this slide that there is a pre-restoration and there is post-restoration period. I'm covering pre-restoration period. So pre-restoration period has, let me quickly move. Pre-restoration English literature. I have already talked about drama. Okay. Now in this video lecture, I'll talk about prose and poetry. Okay. So you are requested to watch the previous lecture as well. Now I'm going to flip the slides, and I'm just reaching today's topic, that is pre-restoration prose. Now pre-restoration prose was in the form of pamphlets, essay writing, character writing, and then we have these were the major events. These are the major genres in which pre-restoration literature existed in the form of prose. In the next slide, I'm going to talk about these prose pieces in detail. Okay. Now pamphlets. There were many pamphlets written. Topics were they were related to religious themes, political themes, and moral themes. So these were the writers who wrote pamphlets. It is a kind of prose. Okay. Brown, Taylor, Clarendon, and Milton. As I have got my own way to teach history of literature, so poets, authors, dramatists who are not of much significance, I usually don't discuss them, and I just focus on main figure of the century. So Milton was also a pamphleteer. So there was a civil war going on. Let me quickly take you back. Wait a while. Here I mentioned in my previous lecture. As you can see, there was a civil war going on, 1642 to 1649, between Charles I and Cromwell. So Milton was on the side of Cromwell. So he wrote many political pamphlets. Okay, and let me take you to the next slide where I was already. This one. So he covered the tenure of kings and magistrates. Here, because Charles I claimed divine right of king, theory of divine rights of king. So Milton was on the side of Cromwell and on the side of freedom, liberty, and parliamentarian system. So he wrote these pamphlets like a treatise of civil power in ecclesiastical causes. So it is a religious pamphlet. Then the ready and easy way to establish a free commonwealth. So this he wrote when Commonwealth had been established in England in 1649. So in 1647, Charles I had resigned his seat, and in 1649 he was beheaded. So Commonwealth under Cromwell was established. That you can say a democratic setup was established in England in 17th century. Milton wrote these pamphlets. He also wrote many pamphlets on divorce tracts. Tracts mean pamphlet. Treatise also mean pamphlet. So the major pamphlet he wrote, the name is Areopagitica. Areopagitica is a pamphlet which he wrote in defense for freedom of press. It is freedom of expression, because the Puritan government under Cromwell, they had imposed number of restrictions on publication of books, etc. So they had established an academy, you can say a censor board, and it was kind of compulsory for all writers that before they got something printed, that publication had to appear before the censor board. So Milton came in defense of freedom of press. Actually, he was fighting against his own government, the government of Cromwell, because he had fought for Commonwealth, but the same people who were freedom fighters against Charles I, when they came to power, they became despot and dictatorial, So Milton fought against this, and he wrote this pamphlet. Now next, essay. So the prominent figure was Francis Bacon in this period, and Bacon's essays, there are numerous essays, and as you BS English first semester student, when you progress into higher semesters, you will read many of his essays. So he introduced aphoristic style, that is pithy style. There was terseness and compactness in his sentences. His sentences were just like proverbs. They were in the form of maxim, epigrams, aphorisms. Aphoristic means very short sentence but full of wisdom, worldly wisdom. And he introduced, advised people in actual life transactions, like what to do in how to run the affairs of this world. So he wrote many essays of studies, like there were so many essays. Inshallah, I'll discuss in a separate lecture about Bacon's essay. So next we have authorized version of Bible. So this was done by the order of James I, and it was a joint project. Many authors and scholars translated Bible into English. So Bible is actually a book, a complete set of books, like 39 books in Old Testament and 27 books in New Testament. Old Testament is Pentateuch. We also call it Torah, Torah. Torah. In Urdu we say Torah. And then Psalms of David. You might have heard the term Zabur. So this is Old Testament. And New Testament consists of Gospels, the literature or scripture related to Jesus Christ. So the Old Testament was in Hebrew and New Testament was in Greek. So it was converted into into English, and many now what were the themes, what was the genre used in Bible? So in Bible there is poetry as well as narrative narration, like lyrical poetry, narrative poetry, but when we talk about narratives, so we can say that it was kind of prose. So Troy's version of Bible was produced in a prose style. So it had much impact upon the writers of the age, those who were trying to produce a prose. Okay, now this was just a preview of the literature available in pre-Restoration 17th century. Now we move to poetry. Now 17th century pre-Restoration poetry. When I say pre-Restoration poetry, it means from 1601 up to 1660. Okay, like Jacobean period and Caroline period, which is also called age of Milton, because Milton was the prominent figure. But this poetry can be divided into according to poets like Milton, and metaphysical poets and Cavalier poets. Cavalier poets were those poets who were royalists, who were supporting Charles I. So some of them, like Herrick and Carew, they were also metaphysical poets. So before I discuss Milton, okay, let's first discuss Milton. So Milton was, he had many qualities in him. He was a style writer, and in his person we can see many features or characteristics of both previous century, that is Renaissance period, and also the current century, that is 17th century. Milton was a Latin secretary to Cromwell. Okay, he was a very learned person, and he acted as a Latin secretary. He dealt with Europeans on behalf of Cromwell. So he was, he had knowledge of classicism. He had knowledge of Hebrew and religious knowledge. He was a kind of humanist. He was a kind of Puritan. So much had accumulated in his person. So his poetry, early poetry, was lyrical, as you can see here. He wrote hymn on the morning of Christ's nativity, when Jesus Christ was born, and then he wrote Allegro, 1632, Il Penseroso, and these two are actually Allegro means joyous man and Il Penseroso means melancholy man. Okay. Then Lycidas, which was a kind of elegy written on the demise of Edward King, his friend, and then Comus. Comus was mosque. It was a kind of play, okay, and mosque. So what was Comus? Comus was a magician who tried to seduce a girl who had been separated from her two brothers. So this is early poetry, and then it comes to later poetry. In later poetry, that is mostly narrative, and like Paradise Lost is an epic, and then Paradise Regained. In Paradise Lost, we come to know about expulsion of Adam and Satan and fallen angels, and in Paradise Regained, we learn about redemption. All this demands a separate video lecture. Inshallah, I'll cover all these topics in detail. Samson Agonistes was a tragedy. Samson was a what should I say, a scriptural figure. He was a prophet, in Israel's prophet. So the progeny of Jacob. So he was a blind person, and he was just surrounded by miseries, and how he fought against those miseries, it has been depicted. Now coming to metaphysical poets. Metaphysical poetry is full of conceits, exaggerations, quibblings about word meaning, display of learning, far-fetched similes and metaphors. So the term metaphysical was given to this school by Dr. Johnson in his work Lives of Poets. So these are the poets of this school: John Donne, Henry Vaughan, George Herbert, Cowley, Morville, Herrick, Carew and Crasher. These two poets are also part of Cavalier poets, that is Lovelace, Suckling, Herrick and Carew. So these poets wrote poetry which was full of conceits and full of comparisons, and there was hair splitting type of things. But I'll just talk about John Donne, and we will definitely have a separate lecture on John Donne. And he was a metaphysical poet, and his poetry is of three types: amorous, metaphysical, satirical. So amorous means love poetry. So he wrote a great number of lyrics, love poems, and like here these are the major works like Progress of the Soul, and Anatomy of the World, and Epithalamium. So there are so many other lyrics which he composed, John Donne. So all this will be discussed inshallah in separate lectures. Some of these will be given to students as presentations or assignment, like Paradise Lost, Paradise Regained, and some other works. That's why usually it is my way that I don't go into details. I just cover main points. So let me take you back quickly. So here we have 17th century pre-restoration poetry, pre-restoration period, age of Milton, which is divided into James I and Charles I era, Jacobean and Caroline era. Here we, I just, time is going to be up. So pre-restoration drama already covered. So then prose, and at the end poetry. Thank you very much. Now we'll come back with fresh lecture.